Hello, everyone. My name is Kennedy. I'm an English major here at WSSU, a graduating senior, and in case you were wondering, I'm Black. Aside from all those things, I'm also an avid reader, and I especially love Black female authors. I'm biased, I know. However, I think that everyone, yes, everyone needs to read works by Black women. This semester, I have had the privilege of taking the university's African American Women's Writers course. I've read some great pieces and have had some great discussions with my classmates. But I also think that it's important to share what I've learned with you all so that you can start reading some great authors as well. And you may be saying, Kennedy, I don't know where to start. Well, don't worry. I've compiled a list of amazing works to help you get started. My goal is that by the end of this episode, you will not only have some new books to put on your shelf, but also a newfound appreciation for these writers. On May 28, 2014, the late author, civil rights activist, and legend Maya Angelou died in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. After my stepfather delivered the news to the family, I sat there perplexed. I insisted that he meant Michelangelo, the Italian Renaissance painter, to which I promptly reminded him that Michelangelo had died centuries ago. My mother and sisters groaned as my stepfather laughed. The next day, he returned home with a book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Maya Angelou's autobiography. He handed it to me and told me to tell him my thoughts when I finished. I took the book back to my room and curiously stared at the front cover. On it was Dr. Angelou herself, dressed in a regal gold and blue robe. Her head was cocked to the side slightly, and a knowing smirk complemented the welcoming sparkle in her eyes. I opened the book, and before I knew it, I was hooked. I hung on to her every word as she recounted the combined joys and trauma of being a young Black girl in the Jim Crow era South. I laughed and cried, squealed into my hands with excitement, and sometimes set the book down onto my bed in pure shock. I finished it one hot, sticky day in June. I felt tears stream down my face, and a girlish scream ripped through my throat. My stepdad rushed into the room to see what was wrong, and I looked up at him, hair and glasses slightly askew, and I whispered that I loved the book. My first brush with Black women's literature was the nail in the coffin for my previously beloved white authors. I had always loved books like Harry Potter and The Witch of Blackbird Pond, but after reading Maya Angelou, how can you turn back to that? I wanted to read nothing but Black authors, Black stories, Black characters, much to the delight of my stepfather. When I read books by Black women about growing up as a Black girl, I felt like someone was finally listening. Someone else knew what it was like to be the only Black girl, to have their hair touched without permission, or to feel like you had to constantly remind others that you belonged in certain spaces. Books like One Crazy Summer and Brown Girl Dreaming gave me a sense of comfort and support that Harry Potter just couldn't. Even now, when I look at the authors and the books I'm reading, I think of middle school Kennedy. I think of her insecurities and her desire to be seen. But then I think about how all it took was one book to change her perspective on everything. Throughout the episode, you'll hear me discuss the importance and impact of the following genres: essays and nonfiction, speculative fiction, historical fiction, Bildungsroman, poetry and short stories, and finally, up-and-coming. For each genre, you will learn about the title and author of one or two works in a specific genre. For each title, I will give you a short explanation of why you should read it and some of the messages that I gleaned from the pieces. And just to pique your interest that much more, I'll even include a little excerpt. So with that being said, sit back, relax, and let's discuss some Black female authors you should read in college. Oftentimes, the thought of reading or writing an essay is the academic equivalent of pulling a slightly loose tooth. It's frustrating, painful, and sometimes takes way longer than you think it should. However, it is imperative to read some essays and nonfiction text. I too used to believe that all essays were full of analysis, and there are some great analytical works to be read as well. But the essay I am encouraging you to read is quite literally life-changing. If you read this with an open mind and a gentle heart, I'm sure you'll find yourself looking at the world with an entirely new perspective. In Search of Our Mother's Gardens by Alice Walker is known by scholars as the book that defines womanism, but it's also the text that, in my opinion, redefines womanhood. Alice Walker's beautifully written prose delves into her personal philosophies about life through a variety of essays. However, the star of the show is, of course, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. In this essay, she details the suppressed creativity of Black women during and after slavery. She mourns the artists lost to the cruelties of misogyny and racism, and uplifts the women who remain to create art with their limited resources. Who are these artists, you ask? There are mothers and grandmothers, our aunties and cousins, and even the church mothers sitting in those pews. This essay made me shed a tear because it reminded me of all the women who raised me. I saw past my mother's famous sun-drop pound cakes and saw her desire to create. My grandmother's love for old-school funk and a clean home suddenly became a clear indicator of her desire for peace. My sister's love for children had become a source of healing for her inner child. And my poetry, my scribbles in notebooks and on whiteboards, were just the stories I wanted to tell, but I didn't know how to. This essay made me realize that I am a Black woman, carrying the unrealized potential of Black female artistry within my fingertips. But it also made me realize that Black women around me had a reason for being abrasive and sometimes outright rude. They were artistically frustrated. If you, like me, are wondering why your mama always got an attitude, I highly encourage you to read this work and search for her garden. Then, when you call home or go back for a weekend, tell her how much you've missed her cooking or her singing or anything that she does to create. Go and enjoy your mother's garden. And so, our mothers and grandmothers have, more often than not, anonymously, handed on the creative spark, the seed of the flower they themselves never hoped to see, or like a sealed letter they could not plainly read. And so it is, certainly, with my own mother. Unlike Ma Rainey's songs, which retain their creator's name even while blasting forth from Bessie Smith's mouth, no song or poem will hear my mother's name. Yet so many of the stories that I write, that we all write, are my mother's stories. Only recently did I fully realize this, that through years of listening to my mother's stories of her life, I have absorbed not only the stories themselves, but something of the manner in which she spoke, something of the urgency that involves the knowledge that her stories, like her life, must be recorded. Black speculative fiction is an overarching term for fiction that seeks to question society from an Afrocentric perspective. Fun fact, we have a class all about Black speculative fiction. If you're interested in diving deeper into Black spec, I highly suggest taking the Black speculative fiction course when you get the chance. Anyways, over the summer, I was able to experience the Afrofuturism exhibit at the Museum of African American History. As I wandered through the exhibit, I realized that I saw many familiar faces and names. The concept of Black people in space or on alternate planets felt foreign, but after seeing the videos of Michael Jackson, Missy Elliott, and George Clinton, I realized that Black folks had been in space for years. Black science fiction and Afrofuturism gives an answer to the big what-ifs. What if there were Black people in space? What if Black people could reach the stars? What if Black people could have a future where the sky is the limit? If you're looking for an answer to these questions, or you want to pose a few of your own, then you should really consider reading some Black spec. Dark Matter, A Century of Speculative Fiction from the African Diaspora, is an anthology of Black speculative fiction compiled by Cherie Thomas. While this book does not have solely Black female authors, there are still some excellent reads that stick with you long after you finish them. One of my personal favorites, Sister Lilith, is by Honoree Jeffers. You may be familiar with the biblical figure of Lilith, Adam's first wife. Well, this short story details her version of what happened in the Garden of Eden and all the craziness that led to her wandering the earth alone. This story led to some great discussion about gender roles, resentment, and communication issues within relationships during my class period. Plus, it's only about 4 pages. I, of course, encourage you to read more than just Sister Lilith, but I do think that this is a good one to start with, just because of all the ways you can contribute to the conversation. He used to talk to me about my size all the time. He would say, "Lily, you just as little and as soft and as pretty as one of these doves flying around this tree." He would say, "I could pick you up with one of my fingers. You one sweet baby doll." Sometimes he would scare me a little when he would come in from the animals smelling a little funky and growling my ear. "Boo, Miss Lily." Yeah, he scared me because muscles are trouble. They give the mind a sense of what can be taken. I only like to pretend. I didn't really want to be an animal, just during season. Always from behind. Historical fiction, in my opinion, is often just as impactful when attempting to understand the significance of slavery, Jim Crow, etc. than any of these nonfiction texts are. I think it's easier to hear historical accounts and forget that real people went through these atrocities. But when I read the troubles of the characters I've grown to love, I find myself resonating with the issues more. These were no longer slaves, but enslaved people. They had dreams, aspirations, and histories that were stolen from them in the name of profit. MLK stopped being the guy who did a "I have a dream" speech, and he became a beacon of hope whose light was snuffed out far too soon. Historical fiction helps Black history feel real and involved. Sometimes we fall guilty of viewing history as just being a recanting of the past. All the while we forget that these are the stories of ancestors both known and unknown. As students at a historically Black college, we should be making it a priority to make our history come alive. Homegoing by Yagi Yasi follows 8 generations of 2 separated half-sisters, one who is sold into slavery, and the other who becomes the wife of a high-ranking British official. Each new generation is riddled with issues of racism, homophobia, colonialism, etc. The work is incredibly well researched as well, so each of these stories serve as a sort of culmination of the stories of our ancestors. I especially love how much context the stories give to parent-child relationships. As a reader, you understand what the parents went through and why they act the way they do, but their children don't. It makes for some heartbreaking moments, but my lord, is it worth it. Yasi truly makes history come to life in this book. I became attached to almost every family member, no matter what period they lived in. Not only that, but it also touches on the disconnection many non-continent members of the African diaspora feel from their roots, especially for African Americans. I think this book is an excellent way to remember the humanity of Black history. Sure, we can look at statistics and old pictures of what happened, but I think there is also a lot of value of seeing fictional accounts of our true history. Come see. She stepped a little bit closer, but stopped again when the fire roared into the sky. "It's okay," he said, and he believed it. He held out his hand. "It's okay." She walked to where he stood, where the fire met the water. He took her hand and they both looked out into the abyss of it. The fear that Marcus had felt inside the castle was still there, but he knew it was like the fire, a wild thing that could still be controlled, contained. Then Marjorie released his hand. He watched her run headlong into the crashing waves of the water, watched her dip under until he lost her, and all he could do was wait for her to resurface. When she did, she looked at him, her arms moving circles around her. And though she didn't speak, he knew what she was saying. It was his turn to come to her. Buildings romans, or the coming-of-age stories, are often the most satisfying to read because they make you realize that growing up is actually not that bad. As a college student, you're about to endure a lot of changes that will define who you are for a very long time, if not for the rest of your life. As I finish up my last few weeks of college, all I can do is thank God I'm not where I was when I first got here. I started out with a strong desire to be someone, but that someone wasn't me. I had plans to join SGA, run for Miss WSSU, join the campus activities board, go to parties, all the stuff everyone tells you to do in college. However, I got to Winston and realized that I had no desire to actually do any of those things. I had to carve my own path, and that was so much more fulfilling. Sure, I lost friends, and some people thought I was being foolish, but I didn't listen to them. I joined my smaller organizations, stayed in my room or the library, and eventually I found things I loved and people who would become my best friends. Adulthood isn't about finding out who you want to be. It's about finding out who you are and being okay with whoever that is. The comfort of the Buildings Roman is that it reminds you that it's okay to not have everything figured out just yet. All you have to do is trust the process, and somehow, some way, things just start to figure themselves out. The Thing Around Your Neck by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is a collection of short stories that Adichie wrote upon migrating from Nigeria to America. You may know Adichie for her famous TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story, which has actually plagued me for the last 5 years of my academic career. Anyways, the comfort in this collection of short stories comes from the humanity of Adichie's immigrant characters. WSSU serves students from across the African diaspora, and I'm sure that a few listeners can relate to the immigrant experience. Many of you might have become acutely aware of your accent or the foods you eat upon coming to America, or maybe you had family and friends that did. All the while, you're still navigating life as a young adult, trying to become your own person, but never wanting to fully separate from your family. You worry that maybe college isn't for you. Maybe the dream you dreamt was a fluke, and you wasted your parents' time and money chasing fruitless dreams. I know the feeling. I'm not the daughter of an immigrant, but I felt the paralyzing fear of imposter syndrome. Don't feel like you're alone, because I can almost guarantee that most people around you are thinking the same thing. But if you'd like a bit of confirmation that you're really not alone, take a look at this collection. The tablecloth shielded your clasped hands. He squeezed your hand and you squeezed back and wondered why he was so stiff, why his extra virgin olive oil covered eyes darkened as he spoke to his parents. His mother was delighted when she asked if you'd read Noel El Saadawi and you said yes. His father asked how similar Indian food was to Nigerian food and teased you about paying when the check came. You looked at them and felt grateful that they did not examine you like an exotic trophy, an ivory tusk. Afterwards, he told you about his issues with his parents, how they portioned out love like a birthday cake, how they would give him a bigger slice if he'd only agreed to go to law school. You wanted to sympathize, but instead you were angry. Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison details the life of Macon Dead, aka Milkman, as he transforms from an immature man-child to a grounded and slightly mature adult. Milkman spends the first half of the novel mooching off the women in his family, escaping responsibility, and being an overall burden to just about everyone around him. However, in the second half, Milkman is forced to go on a journey to find himself and his roots. I think the best part about this story is that it takes Milkman so long to finally grow up. He's a whiny man-child, but let's be honest, many of us know someone just like him. They always feel like there's some invisible force pulling the strings, the man or the system. But in actuality, it's just their own immaturity and lack of self-awareness. You'll meet a lot of people who complain about favoritism and tough professors, and it'll be annoying at first for sure. However, there's something beautiful in seeing these people figure out their own path and finally put in the work they need to achieve their goals. Jake's father was Solomon. Did Jake whirl about and touch the sun? Did Jake leave a baby in a white man's house? No. If the Solomon don't leave me line was right, Solomon was the one who left, who flew away, meaning died or ran off, but not Jake. Maybe it was the baby or Jake himself who was begging him to stay. But who was the black lady who fell down on the ground? Why did she throw her body all around? It sounded like she was having a fit. Was it because somebody took her baby first to a white man's house, then to an Indian's house? Rana? Was Rana the black lady still crying in the gulch? Was Rana Solomon's daughter? Maybe she had an illegitimate child, and her father... No, it's Solomon she's crying for, not a baby. Solomon, don't leave me. He must have been her lover. Milkman was getting confused, but he was as excited as a child confronted with boxes and boxes of presents under the skirt of a Christmas tree. Somewhere in the pile was a gift for him. Okay, so maybe I'm biased, but I absolutely adore poetry and short stories. As a poet and short story writer, I find it so beautiful when authors can convey so many thoughts in so few words. There's so much work that goes into writing a poem or a short story, but seeing the end result makes it all worth it. I have some poems that are less than 100 words that I have spent ages poring over before I felt like they were ready to be shared. I wanted to make sure every word was impactful enough to stick with people, but not so convoluted that I would stumble while trying to read it out loud. Truthfully, there's nothing quite like reading a beautiful, thought-provoking poem. And a similar notion can be seen when discussing short stories. Short stories get overlooked mostly because they require you to connect and detach from characters quickly. However, like I said, they are so worth it when you read a good one. If you're in need of some quick reads that you can meditate on throughout the day, I highly recommend adding a few poems and short stories to your to-be-read list. We Real Cool by Gwendolyn Brooks is an extremely quick read, but that doesn't take away from its cutting message. In college, there is often the desire to explore freedom, parties, sex, drugs, and alcohol. They tell you that they hold the key to adulthood. After all, you haven't had the college experience if you ain't been blackout drunk across at some point. However, you'll soon realize that this lifestyle is not sustainable, nor is it conducive to your success as a college student. I've seen so many people come to college with hopes of becoming doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, only to lose themselves in this notion of the college experience. This isn't an attempt to shame you away from these natural inclinations, but rather it's a caution to you. The people that come to college purely for the experience of it all rarely make it past freshman year, if they even make it past their first semester. The Pool Players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. We real cool, we left school. We lurk late, we strike straight. We sing sin, we thin gin. We jazz June, we die soon. Accent or the foods you eat upon coming to America, or maybe you had family and friends that did. All the while, you're still navigating life as a young adult, trying to become your own person, but never wanting to fully separate from your family. You worry that maybe college isn't for you. Maybe the dream you dreamt was a fluke and you wasted your parents' time and money chasing fruitless dreams. I know the feeling. I'm not the daughter of an immigrant, but I felt the paralyzing fear of imposter syndrome. Don't feel like you're alone, because I can almost guarantee that most people around you are thinking the same thing. But if you'd like a bit of confirmation that you're really not alone, take a look at this collection. The tablecloth shielded your clasped hands. He squeezed your hand and you squeezed back and wondered why he was so stiff, why his extra virgin olive oil covered eyes darkened as he spoke to his parents. His mother was delighted when she asked if you'd read Nawal el-Saadawi and you said yes. His father asked how similar Indian food was to Nigerian food and teased you about paying when the check came. You looked at them and felt grateful that they did not examine you like an exotic trophy, an ivory tusk. Afterwards, he told you about his issues with his parents. How they portioned out love like a birthday cake. How they would give him a bigger slice if he'd only agreed to go to law school. You wanted to sympathize, but instead you were angry. The up-and-coming category is the space to highlight one of the lesser-known Black female authors that has the potential to become a classic in the future. One thing you'll realize in college is that not everyone will recognize your genius. It sucks to say that, but it's the truth. You'll get overlooked during career fairs, ghosted when you try to hang out with that person you met during your audition, and it'll seem like nobody ever reads your emails. However, the key to getting through these moments is to realize that one day, somehow, some way, someone will notice all your hard work and you will be rewarded for it. Okay, so for this last book, I'm not going to lie, I haven't had the time to read it. It's on my bookshelf though, I promise. I wanted to highlight this one because I've heard so much about it through friends and social media. So instead of accidentally spoiling the book by looking for an excerpt, I will just read the description of the novel from the school library journal. Anyways, the book is called Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Iyamide and is the recipient of numerous awards, such as the 2022 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work for Youth and Teens, the 2022 William C. Morris Award finalist, 2022 Edgar Award nominee for Best Young Adult, a Junior Library Guild selection, a YALSA 2022 Best Fiction for Young Adults finalist, an Amazon Best Book of 2021, a School Library Journal Best Young Adult Book 2021, a BuzzFeed Best YA Book Covers of 2021, a Boston Globe Best Book of 2021, an Autostraddle Best Queer Book of 2021, and the Young Adults Best Book Debut of 2021. Like I said, the book has been up and down my For You page and my Explore page, so I bought it over the summer. Me personally, I feel like this book will be a great thriller for some light reading and some excellent representation over the holidays. So if you have the time, why not check it out? I'm sure it'll go great with some hot chocolate and a cozy blanket. Chiamaka Adebayo and Devin Richards are selected senior prefects during their final year at the elite Nivius Academy. Chiamaka is ambitious, unapologetic, and social climbing. She sets her sights on the Snowflake Ball, a Yale acceptance letter, and legacy rich boy Jamie Fitzjohn. Devon is low-key, inhibited, and reserved. He does not want to make waves with his music, Juilliard aspirations, and homosexuality. Chiamaka and Devon are surprisingly linked when a shady figure known as Aces exposes their secrets and lies to Nivius and Devon's impoverished neighborhood through harassing texts. They slowly discover their friends, classmates, and faculty as fair weather, and realize they were not only targeted because of the secret and lies. Their status as the only Black students pose a threat to a secret white supremacist network at Nivius. Chiamaka and Devon must work together to ensure they make history as the first Black graduates or die trying at the hands of Aces, who will do anything and everything to prevent their upward mobility. Readers will love this thriller mystery reminiscent of Gossip Girl and Get Out. The plot keeps readers guessing. Themes of systemic racism, structural white supremacy, microaggressions, class distinctions, and LGBTQIA+ identities will also resonate with readers. Verdict: a revelatory, buzzworthy debut. Well, I hope you enjoyed our time together, because I sure did. Black women's literature will always hold a place in my heart, and I hope it finds a place in yours as well. I've had a wonderful time talking about some wonderful books, so make sure to check out these authors and their works. Until next time, Ramily. Oh, and in case you were wondering, I'm still Black.